Hello again. In this lesson and in the next lesson, we're going to be focusing on the characteristics of faith. What are the qualities of biblical faith? And so that's for this lesson and the next one. And we have a little bit more reading to do in this lesson today, in part because we're really getting into some fairly hardcore theology. And so we're going to begin in paragraph 153. The very first thing that we want to say about faith is that it is a grace. You will recall that when Jesus asks his disciples, who do you say that I am? Peter is the one that says, you are the Christ. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And so he nails that one. He gets that question exactly right. And Jesus says as much and says that you are blessed, Peter, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you. You have this because the Father has revealed this to you. He says, my Father who is in heaven is the source of your understanding this. So the first thing that we want to say about faith is that it is a grace. And by that we mean it is a gift. It is not something that we can sort of generate ourselves. No one can just simply decide without the gift, without the grace of the Holy Spirit, to believe in God. Okay? Which is why you can't simply argue somebody into having faith. Cardinal Newman once said that it makes, and this is a paraphrase, it makes about as much sense as to torture somebody into believing as arguing them into believing. Because belief is not, or faith in particular here, faith is not something that is just merely a rational assent. It requires the gift of the Holy Spirit. And so, again, in paragraph 153, a person must have the interior helps of the Holy Spirit who moves the heart and converts it to God, who opens the eyes of the mind and makes it easy for all to accept and believe the truth. So we need the grace of the Holy Spirit. The grace of the Holy Spirit doesn't come to just simply help us out when we've already started on the way to living faith. No, even our beginning to move in the direction of a living faith in Jesus Christ is prompted by the Holy Spirit. Okay, so faith is a grace. It is a gift. It is something that we don't merit. It's not something that we deserve. Nevertheless, this Holy Spirit, God the Holy Spirit, can and desires to give that gift to us. At the same time, belief is also a human act. That the Holy Spirit, yes, is the source of living faith, but He doesn't override our humanity. He doesn't override our intellects. That He makes use of them. Remember we said before that faith is the submission of the intellect and the will, the totality of the human person, to all that God has revealed. And yes, we can only do that by the power of the Holy Spirit, but it still really involves our intellect. That is an act of the understanding as well as a submission of obedience of the will. So it's prompted by the Holy Spirit. We are empowered to believe by the Holy Spirit, but that doesn't mean a kind of overriding of our natural human faculties. So faith is an authentically human act. And while it is supernatural, it is a supernatural gift, a supernatural virtue, it does not sort of go contrary to what we are by nature. Because God is both the author of our created nature as well as the author and perfecter of what is supernatural in us, faith, hope, and charity. And so faith then can't ever be something that goes contrary to the good of the intellect or contrary to the good of the will. I want to just call your attention to paragraph 154. Believing is possible only by grace and the interior helps of the Holy Spirit, but it is no less true that believing is an authentically human act. Trusting in God and cleaving to the truths as He has revealed are contrary neither to human freedom nor to human reason. Even in human relations, it is not contrary to our dignity to believe what other persons tell us about themselves and their intentions, or to trust their promises. For example, when a man and a woman marry, to share a communion of life with one another. If this is so, still less is it contrary to our dignity to yield by faith the full submission of intellect and will to God who reveals, and to share in an interior communion with Him. We don't say that it's somehow contrary to our freedom or contrary to our good or even contrary to the truth to trust somebody else, what they say about themselves. In fact, it's necessary. Faith is necessary in all, or some kind of belief is necessary in all avenues of our life. When you think about this, if you take a chemistry class, some of you may be taking a chemistry class right now. When you take a chemistry class, the very first thing you see in a chemistry book, usually on the inside flap, is the periodic table. Well, you have to sort of trust. You're not going to go out and sort of check the facts and make sure that that copper actually exists, or boron actually exists. No, you take that on faith. You couldn't even get to the very first chapter of your chemistry book unless you believed, unless you took on a kind of faith, so to speak, the truth that is communicated in the periodic table. You're not going to wait around to verify the claims of the periodic table. Okay, so belief is necessary even to just simple kind of intellectual progress as well as to human communion. How much more is it necessary, and how much more fitting is it for that to be part of our communion with God in Jesus Christ? So this brings me to, I love this little paragraph because it's actually a quote from probably my favorite theologian, St. Thomas Aquinas. And he, in just very few words, I think summarizes this fact about the nature of faith. He says, and again, this is paragraph 155, "In faith, the human intellect and will cooperate with divine grace." And this is the quote from Aquinas. "Believing is an act of the intellect, assenting to the divine truth by command of the will, moved by God through grace." Well, man, that is a mouthful. But notice what it is. It is an act of the intellect, assenting to the divine truth, by command of the will. That is, the will moves the intellect to say yes to God's truth. So let's explore further the relationship of faith and reason. What is the relationship between our understanding and the supernatural act of faith? Well, while it is a supernatural act by which we come to believe in the revelation of God, God doesn't just simply propose things for us that we accept, that there are, so to speak, external helps to our faith. In the Bible, we see the miracles of Christ, the miracles that occur throughout sacred history in the Old Testament as well as in the New Testament. We also have, in addition to external proofs like miracles and so on, we also have the interior helps of the Holy Spirit by which our intellect can come to understand things and to accept certain things that would otherwise be impenetrable to the intellect, or difficult for the intellect to grasp. Okay, take a look at paragraph 156. "Thus the miracles of Christ and the saints, prophecies, the church's growth and holiness, and her fruitfulness and stability are the most certain signs of divine revelation adapted to the intelligence of all. They are motives of credibility which show that the assent of faith is by no means a blind impulse of the mind." That's very, very important. So the miracles of Christ, the fulfillment of prophecy, the fact that the church is an ancient and unbroken institution that, though if it were merely a human institution, ought to have fallen apart ages ago, still is one, it is still stable, it still teaches the same truths throughout the century. That is itself a kind of a miracle. I remember in my own conversion, one of the things that made me come to believe in the kind of supernatural character of the Catholic Church was not, the times, sort of the golden ages of the Church, if they ever existed, but the fact that, for instance, in the 14th century, when things were going very, very badly in the Church, and there were lots and lots of corrupt individuals in the highest offices in the Church, including popes, that the Church should have fallen apart then. And yet, it's also the age in which great saints arose. It also is this period of time in which the Holy Spirit is moving mightily to raise up saints, to raise up great teachers of the faith, despite the human evil that existed in her deepest recesses. So things like all of these things that, while strictly speaking, aren't absolutely necessary to faith, they are helps to faith. They are, as the Catechism says, motives for credibility. We can look to miracles, fulfilled prophecies, and so on, the stability of the Catholic Church, and go, there's got to be more than just a human reality here. There must be something that underlies all of this that is beyond just simply what we see by way of appearances. And we're going to talk a little bit more about faith and understanding, or faith and reason, in our next lesson. So we'll see you then.